entitled to have homestead exemptions on the adjacent properties and that kind of stuff. In addition to the records that we obtained from the appraisal district, we have searched public records in both Texas and Travis County for marriages, because it's important to know if someone's married has an effect on their exemptions or the entitlement to it. We searched Travis County voter registration records, deed records, and Austin water utility customer records. All these things help us to sort of have an understanding of where people are living, and so, you know, it probably shows that she was opening the door, I was a little distracted there. Research just gives us a pretty good idea where property owners are with residence homestead exemptions actually live. And by the same token, it indicates which of their homes probably actually warrants the exemption, assuming that I've gotten the ownership links correct. When we finish the interview, I'll provide you a disc of that contains an Excel spreadsheet of our findings. And what I'd like you to do at that point is take a look at it and see if the data seems to be correct or not. Okay. And we'd like to get your comments back by noon Wednesday if possible, so that we can get that into the story that we're going to publish on Thursday. Okay. I'll start off with the questions. In late February this year, the appraisal district mailed letters to 1,280 property owners whose mailing address was different from their property address, the status address. The letters were to give property owners, as I understand it, 30 days to respond, and those who didn't respond would have their exemptions removed. Subject to the exceptions for temporary way affidavits, military personnel, or owner has returned and needed a change of address form. I was wondering, I wanted to know how did you select the property owners that would get those letters on the different mailing address?
That particular run was based on looking at the mailing address, zip code, and the property zip code. And we saw specifically so that we can target, given limited resources, we need to make sure that we're targeting it as efficiently as possible. We knew that if the zip code was outside of the Austin city limits, that there's a high probability that those were unwarranted exemptions. So we looked for things that were outside of 787 or 786 zip code, so that we could define those that are out-of-town property owners in that particular run.
Yeah, I noticed some of those were out of state. Even.
Yes, yes.
And were those the only 1,280 properties that had a mailing address that was different from the status address?
That had the mailing address where the zip code was out of the city or Travis County area. Those were the ones that we identified at that time.
So you focused on out of Travis County?
Out of Travis County, yeah.
Well, actually, there was a good number in there that had Austin mailing addresses, or at least that was a city address. I haven't really studied that database in detail, but I noticed I did some sorts, and one of them was by city. Okay. And there's a whole lot of them that are in Austin.
Well, and I don't know if you guys did another run, but I think from the computer's perspective, from IT perspective, it was looking specifically for out-of-town owners because we're trying to target for those that we know for sure we might have a problem with.
Right.
We do a separate run for properties that we look at that are within the city limits, because we're going to question those. Those have a lot more circumstances where they may actually be valid for the mailing address to be different. They take a little bit more research. The ones that are out of town, we've got pretty good certainty that we might have a problem with those properties.
Okay. Can you tell me roughly, I know this is off the top of your head because you know what questions I was going to ask, but can you tell me roughly how many exemptions were removed as a result of that mail-out campaign?
At the last check that I can remember, I think it was close to 700-800 exemptions that were actually removed. We had some of those properties where the property owners have actually sold those properties. So we're still going to remove the exemptions, but our form letters and things for those properties, we have to actually taper them because the situation has actually changed. So we still have, I think, about 100 of those left to go. But off the top of my head, I think about 800
were canceled. So that was a good exercise.
Yes.
And our homestead exemptions, we've got, I believe, about 171,000 properties that have a homestead exemption, and we recognized that there's a lot of auditing that it needs to be done on our records, and we're trying to do it a piece at a time.
Yeah,
and to
it's a
kind of
big bite.
we're trying to take those, we're trying to get the most high valued ones where we think we have the most problem, which were the ones where we had a mailing address outside of City of Austin.
Right.
And then we're going to look at those internal. We're looking at the ones where it's been 15 years since they filed their homestead exemption. We're sending out a survey letter for those properties to let them know that we need them to confirm that they still are qualified for their property
You
exemptions.
say you are sending them
We
out.
are sending those out. No, December is the month that we are allowed to do that kind of survey, so we're
Right.
sending those out in December, and we'll be doing that. And this is the first time in my memory that the appraisal district has ever done anything like that. And so we're looking again at the out-of-town owners. We're looking at those that are within city of limits. We also, our computer system, we did a conversion in 2004. And from that point forward, all of our applications were imaged into the computer system. But prior to that, the applications were put in a warehouse.
Uh-huh.
And so we're looking specifically also at all of those where we don't have a computerized image of
Right.
those applications,
Right.
so that we can get them to reapply, so that we've got something current in our system that is readily accessible. Because we've noticed that we've had some issues retrieving things from the warehouse, and so we want to make sure that we get as much as possible into the system in a computerized fashion so that we can query those and pull those.
Good. Sounds like an important exercise.
Well, and it's different for the appraisal district because I don't think that in the past and under prior administrations that we've focused on some of the problems that we've had with the correct application of exemptions. And so we're looking at rectifying that, making some corrections, and auditing our records. And I think it's been overdue for us to do a comprehensive audit of our records.
I think that's a grand idea, based on our finding.
Yeah.
Well, our analysis of the database of people who got those letters, those 1,280 people, didn't really, I think maybe there was like one person on that whole list that was in our database of suspects who may have exemptions that are improper, because they have two. And so, So my point is that y'all didn't appear to, in that particular mailing anyway, target people who had two properties with exemptions. Would that be a?
Yeah, those are the most difficult to kind of identify when they're trying to claim two exemptions, particularly when they claim one in one name and another in a different name. We are, with the legislative change that came into play, requiring them to provide a copy of the driver's license. We're hoping that we can use that information in the future to help us identify when the property is claiming an exemption in more than one location within Travis County, based on the driver's license number that is being submitted to us.
Right.
But again, we've only had, I think, 3 years now of actually being able
Yeah,
to acquire that data.
2011 session, brought in, and at that time you had to have vehicle registration, and then
Right.
then the next session, 2013, they took out the vehicle registration.
That's correct.
So
Correct.
now you just have the driver's license.
Now we just have the driver's license, yeah.
Um,
So our goal, our hope is that having that driver's license information that we can attach to that homestead exemption information will help us in the future be able to identify duplicates or when people are trying to claim more than one.
It will help going forward.
Yes,
Yeah.
moving forward.
And I think the problem that we think we've identified is the problem going backwards,
Yes.
which is probably a far greater problem. Given that, over the context, like you said, some of these things go back for decades.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, yeah. Well, you mentioned that you were authorized to do the mail survey between December the 1st and 31st of each year. So why did y'all do this mail out in February? What triggered the letters you sent out in February?
The survey is actually different than the different mailing address letter.
Oh, okay.
It's a separate process.
Okay.
The different mailing address letter is a run that we actually do at the beginning of the year to property owners where, again, out-of-town areas is what we were focusing on. When those the address was actually different. So it's not the same letter, it's a completely different one.
Okay. I didn't understand that. Thank you. Well, have y'all initiated any other campaigns like this since that big batch of letters in February? anymore, I mean, similar to that?
We have not. It's been in the plans, but unfortunately, protest season slows us down.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's the same department, so
Right,
we
right.
kind of get a little slowed down with protest season.
Sure.
But we are starting forward, because that was the main thing, is for us to actually get back on track for properties that are within the Travis County area. And that's one of the things we're going to focus on now. But again, that is a very large run that we have to actually look at and go through on those properties. So it's taken us more time than expected to actually get through that.
Well, I should have asked you a minute ago when you said the DMA, different mailing address, exercise is different from the one that's supposed to take place in December. What's the key difference there? I'm not sure I understood that.
We have a survey letter going out. As Ms. Krigler stated, we have property owners who've been having homesteads for years.
Right.
And unfortunately, due to our computer system, we're going to confirm that those properties, it's a two-parter actually, as far as auditing to make sure that that property owner still meets the requirements for exemption. Right. We're going to do that on everyone to make sure that that property owner is still valid for that homestead exemption. Good. Because what if that mailing address is still going to the property, someone's getting that mail and not getting it to the property owner. So we're taking a separate step as far as not only identifying when the mailing address is different, but try to collect everyone that's not receiving, that shouldn't be receiving a homestead exemption on those properties.
That sounds like an important exercise.
Yes.
A big one, though.
It's a big one, yes.
And we kind of have to batch that based on the resources that we have to process it. And we send a lot of letters out, but I also have to be able to process those letters when they get in. And so we're going to have to take these in chunks.
I did the same thing with my open records request.
Yeah. So we're going to have to look at taking these in chunks, you know, starting with the oldest and moving forward in time.
Sounds like a good plan. You know, I've submitted, for this project, I was having them up today, I've submitted 23 open records requests, of which 13 came to you guys. And since June. I started, I think, in June 14th with the request for a database of exemptions, properties with exemptions, and residential only, of course. Right. And at that time, there was a little over 164,000 properties that had exemptions, and you said, well, we go 171, so I guess the list is...
As new properties are added, new exemptions are added into our system.
It's only going to grow. I mean,
yes.
And you know, with all the houses are being built, people buying houses and moving in, condos, a lot of condos being built. So it occurred to me, you know, since none of the people that were on that DMA list were in our findings, there was one guy that well, I'll just ask you the broad question, and then I'll get down to more detail. Has the appraisal district initiated any correspondence with property owners that were named in the Austin Bulldog's public information request for applications for homestead exemptions?
Actually, yes, we have. When we got the request, because again, you got to remember some of these applications are things that have been in our system for years.
Right.
But when we got the request, as it was being filled, first, of course, because it's an open records request, we have so much time to get that information back out to you. Our first priority was actually filling the request.
Right.
Once the request was filled, then we did go back over those property owners where the exemptions should not have been in place or should not have been there. And we did start going back through and removing exemptions. So, yes.
Okay. So you went to school on my work.
I thank you for your work.
We appreciate any assistance
any
that
chance
we can get.
I mean, if it's there and it's an error, we will work on it.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, that was my suspicion because I interviewed a property owner named Pablo Ornelas Jr., who said he was recently got a certified letter from the appraisal district about having an exemption on his second home, which is located at 2410 Glen Springs Way. He said he will be billed for back taxes, and the records that we got from the appraisal district indicate that he has had an improper exemption on that home for 15 years, just the number that you picked out a while ago. So you're saying that Ornelas probably did get the result of that letter as a result of our open records request?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, good. We're doing something here. He's just one of the property owners that, involved in our investigation. And we got his applications from you on another open records request about October the 1st. So you're saying that you've used our open records request to send out some letters?
Yes, sir.
Do you have any idea how many letters you sent out as a result of that?
Right off the top of my head, I am not sure because I didn't personally send those out. There were
Right.
2 clerks that actually
Right,
worked
right.
on that. I believe though that there were quite a few letters because at first I don't remember them saying that it's going to be, oh, we're going to have some upset taxpayers.
I have spoken, talking about upset, Mr. Ornelas is going to get it back. His 2013 tax bill has been revised by the tax collector's office as a result of y'all's letter to them. I don't know, I'll say a letter, whatever y'all send. I talked to Renee Descartes over there, who's the deputy in charge of collections, and she ran some numbers for me. She said that their tax bill on that Glen Springs Way home will go from about $1,008, I think, if memory serves me right, up to, it'll increase by like $2,600 and something for the 2013 alone. And then he's going to get a back tax bill of over $14,000 for that Glen Springs home. So the total increase on that one property will be over $17,000. So upset is probably the right word. In response to my public information request of June 14th, y'all provided, well, I think we've already actually started covering this. I was going to ask you a question about the fact that y'all may have overlooked some people in your mail campaign, but because of, you know, the crossover and my open records request, but I think we've actually already gone over that question. And we've already covered the next question, which was that the law was modified to require personal identification to help y'all to weed out improper exemptions going forward. Pardon me here while I'm reading my questions. So my next question is, okay, now that you have the identification required, when you're reviewing a new application for homestead exemption, what steps are you taking to determine if the applicant already has a homestead exemption on another property that's located in Travis County?
Well, in addition to what we actually already have, we have a new tool in our capacity, which we did not have in prior years in the appraisal district, and that's our LexisNexis, which is accurate, where we can actually check a property owner to verify any addresses that that property owner may have.
Well, that's interesting. I haven't heard of that one before.
Give me some accurate.
I mean, I've heard of LexisNexis, but I haven't heard of y'all.
It's new. It's something that I was
year.
wanting, and I thank my chief appraiser for actually getting it for us to help us out with efficiency.
There's some expense to it, but I think overall the expense is beneficial because it ensures that we've got accurate records, and it's something that we've never had before, but I think it's a necessary tool for my exemptions department to do a good job, and so I want to make sure I'm giving them the right tools to do the job that they need to do. And I realize that, you know, we haven't had it, and we've got a backlog of work that we need to catch up on, but, you know, we're going to take that, you know, bite at a time and try to get through it.
I'm sorry. I was interrupting.
Oh, that's all right. That's okay.
No, it isn't all right. I should wait until you.
No, we're just going to tackle this a bite at a time and try to get through it as quickly as we can. But, you know, I understand that we've got a lot of records that we have to audit, and it's going to take us a little time to get through everything that we've got.
Yes, you do.
But we're working on it.
Well, what information, you said that LexisNexis gives you other addresses?
It gives us the other addresses for the property owner. Not only does it give you the current address, but it can go back and give you prior addresses. When you pull it up, it'll give you the owner's name. It'll give you maybe the address. It may say Bill Martin, and I'm going to use the appraisal district, 8314 Cross Park Drive. If this was your address or you were using this address in between June of 2009 till December of 2013, and it'll list that for each address of that property. It kind of gives us an indication of whether or not you have more than one location. It also lists the property owners. It'll give you the properties that that individual actually owns also, so we can.
So it sounds like maybe it's based on grantor, grantee, and credit records, probably, something to that effect. Okay, sounds good. I hadn't heard of that being used. So when did y'all get that? When did you start using it?
We just got LexisNexis this summer.
This summer.
It's a brand new tool that we have.
Shiny new car.
Yes, sir.
Well, what obstacles does the customer service department encounter in trying to identify property owners who already have a residence homestead exemption? For example, by the way that their names are truncated in the TCAD database.
That's correct. A lot of times, unfortunately, it's not only the TCAD database, but it's on the actual, one things I've noticed coming up, it's the way the deeds are filed. We had an instance just this morning where we have a gentleman, it's the same gentleman, but the property's listed under 2 different names. So in that instance, if we were just going through our regular records, it would be difficult for us to catch. If he had a homestead on 2 different properties, it would be difficult to catch because the first name is different. One of them is a first name, one of them is a nickname for the first name.
Mm-hmm.
So
I see a lot of that in,
Yes.
in the database that we've constructed, that we'll give you a copy of at the end of the interview. I see a lot of that. There's also this huge problem, or it seems to me a huge problem. You have Joe Blow and Jane Doe, or Joe and Jane Blow are listed on one deed record, and therefore listed that way in TCAD's database. And then on the next record for that person, their names are switched. So you just have first name, and the database, as far as what I can, as a public person, private citizen, whatever, all I can search for is a name. I mean, you can search by name, address, or account number, but if you're looking for somebody by name and they're the second person on the record, then you won't find them in your database. Why is the search engine constructed so that you can't find everybody who's got an ownership interest?
The database schema, and we use a software vendor, provides for a file as name, an ownership name, and it does not separate a first and last name or multiple names. That's something that we could talk to our software vendor and see if that's something that we could get changed in our software. But it's from our software vendor package, it's just not functionality that's included.
Well, we have examined other, at least one other appraisal district that we know of uses the PAC system that y'all use. And they do not truncate the names that way. Would that be Bayar?
Yeah, I think they do. But they have like multiple fields, so it'll say more than one owner, and then you can click on it, it'll list you owners. And it doesn't truncate any names or anything. So
I'll need to check with them to see what they're actually using.
I
Maybe something we're not
would
aware
think
of.
that was really, from a customer service viewpoint, just being able to use all the data that y'all have at your disposal, I would think that would be real important. But I mean, it's like in I'll give you my own part. Mine's Martin, Kenneth, Wayne, and Rebecca. Rebecca is listed as the mailing address person. Her full name is listed in the mailing address field, but it's not in the owner field. And so if I search for, and her name's not even the same last name as mine. So if I search for Rebecca Melanson, which is the name that appears in the mail address field, you won't find her.
Okay.
You won't find her record. So
Okay.
you have to know that she's married to me. If you were looking for her, you'd have to know that she was married to me and searching my name in order to, to understand this. Back when I was doing the record suppression story in 2011, and that the board voted to change that, and you were made chief appraiser that night. That same, when I was doing that project, the research for produce a report, I was looking for, when I saw that Nelda Wells Spears was not, records were suppressed and stuff like that, I said, well, maybe some public officials are just not getting their names in there or something. And so it seemed like most of the locally elected public officials that I searched for, they had their spouse's name first in the record, and so I could not find them. And then when I figured that out, and I said, oh, well, let's look for the spouse's name, and then I found the property, and their name was attached as the second name in the record. So to me, that is a huge problem with searchability. And my question for you is, when your customer service clerks or representatives are trying to search to see if someone that has an exemption application comes in, and they're trying to see if they have an existing exemption, how do they have any more accessibility than I do through that online website to find that other person?
Actually, I don't believe they have any much more capability than you do, other than if there's 2 names on the property at the property that we're actually going to. Like if your property has your and Rebecca's name on there when we're going in, we would automatically know we've checked your name for any other properties, then we would check Rebecca's name.
But
as
when
far
I
as-
search on the website, I can't even search for the second name. I mean, I can search for it, but it won't pop up. Are you saying that in your system internally, you would find the second name?
Well, if that name is listed, then we would be able to go to the
I
second
mean,
name.
listed in the owner's name.
And listed in the owner's name,
Well,
yes.
my problem is
Yeah,
that it's not listed in the owner's name because I think it is a humongous problem. I mean, you know, you could probably do this on an automated fashion, but if you took your entire database of residential property owners and search and see how many of them have truncated entries, I think you'd find there's a huge percentage. You know, and so to me, that's a big obstacle right there off the bat. If someone submits an exemption application and you're looking to see if they already have one, and you can't even find that the other people who have a ownership interest in the other property in your database, then you would never know, and you would just automatically approve that second exemption if they had an ID that said they lived there, but you wouldn't know that they had one on another property. Is that correct? I mean, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. I'm trying to state this in a way that
Is the
you
name
can-
listed on our records? The second name, is that listed on our records as an ownership? Or?
If it's truncated, like mine, let's say my wife comes in, Rebecca Malonslaw, she submits an exemption application for a property, and she's got a driver's license that says that she lives there. Okay, if you search for her in your existing exemptions applications, just in the owner field, her name won't be there, so you won't find her, and my theory is that you might approve an exemption application for her property
That's
on a
correct.
new
On your
exemption,
property,
and
because
not
her name
know
is
that she
listed
was
second on
co-owner
yours.
of a
That's
property.
correct. You're
Okay.
correct.
So, okay, that's what I want to know. So it is a problem.
It is a problem,
It's a
yes.
big problem. So I don't know. So you're saying that you could get with your software vendor?
We'll check with our software
To
vendor, we'll check
address that.
with Bearcat and see
Yeah.
exactly what they're doing. They may
I
have a
believe it was
third-party
Bear,
add-on.
wasn't it?
I can double check to be for sure, but it's
Yeah.
it's
Okay.
either
Okay.
we only checked like Williamson, Harris, and Bear. It's
Yeah.
either Williamson or
So
Bear.
many of the
Okay.
websites for, I know that by law, I learned when I was doing suppression story, you don't even have to have a website, right? I mean, you don't
No,
have to
we do
put that
not.
out there. And we really appreciate it that
Yeah.
there is one. But when checking in other counties, I think I checked Dallas, Tarrant, Bayard, Harris, and all of them are different. Everybody has a different system. You and Bayard happen to share packs, I think. But
Yes.
and Harris, which has got to be the biggest one in terms of the numbers of properties.
It's biggest in the
probably.
nation.
Yeah. Fourth largest city, is it? But,
I think,
but maybe the largest in terms of property, yeah.
I think Harris CAD has 1.6 million parcels.
Wow.
It's a lot.
And they have a database which is apparently proprietary. I
Yes.
don't know what it is, but I know this. I know if you search for something on that site, it comes up really quick.
Okay.
And I can't remember. I know I checked it, but I can't remember if it actually finds second names on that site or not. But it's not PAX. It's something else. I suspect it's custom. Well, thank you for going over those questions with me, because to me that seems like a big problem.
Well, then that's a good
It
suggestion
is-
for
it
us
is
to
a
take
good
to our IT
suggestion.
department.
Well, I hope that
See if we can
y'all
get
can make
some
it.
resolution. Yes, yeah.
What steps does the customer service department take to find out whether a homestead applicant is married and whether the spouse already has a residence homestead exemption?
Well, now we have our LexisNexis, and that'll tell us there's an area that says relatives, where it would actually show if that person is actually married. But we also, unfortunately, if it's only in Travis County, we have the county clerk's office,
Right.
where we can actually go pull up the marriage license and see
I know
if
you
they're
can,
married.
the question is, do you?
We do, but you gotta remember, when you're working with 11,000 applications,
Yeah.
it gets a little difficult to check every
11,000
person to
what, a
see
year?
if they're, we're getting ready to do a mail out right now, we're about to mail out 11,000 homestead applications for 14.
That's based
Or
on new property
Property
transactions.
transactions.
Homes that have sold in the past year.
I'm sorry, would you explain that a little bit, because I'm not sure I'm following you.
Every property owner that purchases a new property owner, we send them a homestead application. Just as a service,
Right.
so that they can submit their application. And we're doing our quarterly run, and we had 11,000, almost 10,800 applications that we're mailing out just based on recent purchases within the past year.
To apprise them of the fact that they may qualify for
That they could
the
qualify for the homestead,
I
and give them
noticed
an
that some of
application
the
and allow
other,
them to.
yeah, that's a good idea. Some of the other districts that I just mentioned, appraisal districts I just mentioned, on their websites, they actually they have a link to the form right on their website. So you pull up a property record, and it's got a link right there. So, and then it will not only spit out the form, it spits out a custom form that's already got your name in it. You know, so I don't know. That's maybe getting a little beyond.
I think
that's
she's working in the
We
process.
are working with our software vendor to automate the submission of the homestead application online. That's
That'd be
one of our
great.
goals for hopefully the next 18 months, we'll be able to get that in place.
So you think 18 months?
I'm hoping, that's my goal.
Well, if it rolls out faster than Obamacare, that'll be great. So you do check. That's a customary check. Is that what you're saying?
It's not a customary check, because if we only have one property owner on the property, on the homestead application, it asks that you list any other property owners. It doesn't ask if you're married, though. That's one of the problems. It's because the property could be listed in the wife's name and another property could be listed in the husband's name. But we can't check the county clerk's database on everyone to see if there's a marriage license on them. But if we have an inkling and going through looking and seeing if there's a change in the address, a lot of times when property owners send those applications in, sometimes they haven't even changed the address on their driver's license yet. So if we have an indication, or if we see that we've had a recent mailing address change on the records, then we'll check that other address. And then if it leads to a suspicion that that person is married or that there's another property owner, we'll pull the deeds to see if it says if there's a spouse or not. And then we'll go further to check to see if we can find a copy of the marriage certificate.
So do you use LexisNexis on every application?
No, we can't, no. That would actually slow down our processing, because we'd have to check every one.
Check every one what?
Every application for LexisNexis.
So it's a tool that's there if you need it, if you think you need it?
It's a tool that's there, but we have to still define how we're actually going to use it completely. You got to remember, this is a tool we just got this summertime.
Okay.
And getting that tool, I don't know how many homestead applications we've actually had, but I think we only have 3 subscriptions to it. And as far as to going through and checking every homestead application, it's
three subscriptions, which
For 3 users.
for 3 users.
3 users.
Yeah.
And so that means that only maybe you have, and 2 of your clerks or 2 of your representatives?
Me and 2 of the representatives.
So,
But in our processes of actually re-apping in the individuals, it's our hope that with us re-apping them, we're going to be able to get those driver's license numbers and put those into the systems. That way we can double check the driver's license, which will be a backup for us.
I guess, is that a LexisNexis item? The driver's license number?
It is, yes it is.
Okay, so that would give you some good information, yeah. So it's a tool that's available, but you can't use it for everybody.
Unfortunately, we can't.
Do you have any idea, I don't even remember if I put the question in here, how many exemption applications do you process a year?
I can tell you because we've been keeping account of them as far as the applications are concerned. Misty started the count at the beginning of this year, and I think right now we're at about 5,000 received in
5,000 in 2013?
in 2013.
Is that higher or lower? Do you have any sense of what the history is there?
I am not sure with you on that, Mr. Martin, because I just came down in that department.
Because what?
I just came down in that department really at the end of 2011, so I haven't been down there to really judge as far as to what's the average number. Do you know about what the average number of homes is?
I'm sure we could look at and find
Okay.
that out for you.
Okay.
Historically.
Well, 5,000 in 2013 is your...
So far.
So far.
So far.
So far.
But we just mailed another 10,800 of potential, so we could add to that.
You do that
Okay.
every year, the mailing? Okay.
We
So you've
mail.
already done that for the beginning of the 2013 year?
We'll do that. We'll mail applications. We mail them out early and hope that we can get that information, have the exemptions in place before we send our notices of appraised value. But then also when we send our notices of appraised value, everybody that potentially could qualify for an exemption that doesn't have one on the system gets a homestead exemption with their notice of appraised value at that time as well.
And also our exemption applications at this time, it will rise because the individuals that didn't apply for the exemption at the beginning of the year, now that they're getting their bills and they're getting ready to pay, they may realize that they didn't apply for the exemption at the
Right.
beginning of the year, so now they're going to be.
And they're gonna ask for
Yes,
the
sir.
back exemption for last year, right?
Yes, sir.
And then try to adjust their tax bills. Do what you can to get the bills down. Before approving a new application, does the Customer Service Department research deed records, voter registration records, or any other things like that? These are tools that we've used in this project to try to pinpoint where people are living. And I know it's tedious as heck, it's really time consuming. But I'm just curious, the LexisNexis is a great leap forward to have access to that, but you can only use it on spot checks, I guess, basically when there's other, how do you determine if you're going to use LexisNexis?
Believe it or not, really and truly, you get cued to it.
Yeah.
It gets something as you're working the applications, it just comes to you as a cue. When you're processing the application, it becomes standard procedure. You're going to look at the address. Me, myself, I have a habit of going to see if that address has changed for that property owner. When you pull up the property owner, usually I'll look and see if it's someone that's 40 years old, then I may say, okay, is this person's first home? Let me see if they've had anything else, to see if I can kind of find anything else. So it just becomes habit to you as far as to
Sure.
what you go through and
I'm
a
familiar.
sense of what to tell and look for the exemptions.
In journalism, we call it, your radar, your radar,
Yes.
radar goes up, something's going on here. Well, do y'all ever research, go back and read the deed records?
We do.
You
We
do?
do. We have access to the county clerk's records. That's
Right?
online.
They're online, yeah.
So we can go
Well,
through.
they're not online right now. You can search the index, but you can't pull up the actual deed records. They've had a glitch on their site. I found it about a week ago and been bugging them about it, and they haven't fixed it yet. You know
I
how
just
you're
watched
supposed to be
it
able to
this
pull up the
morning.
images except on the real old records? Where and then it would come up, no image available. But now the deed records are not accessible, nor are the marriage records. You can get the index of the marriage record. You can say, okay, they got a license here, they got married that date, but you can't see the certificate like you used to. You get a little thing, a little box down at the bottom of the page that says,
I had that problem too.
huh?
I had that problem too when I was first in.
Yeah.
I
It's,
wonder
Well,
if
I
they did
could-
something,
I
because I just
could-
pulled one up this morning.
Yeah.
well, maybe they got it fixed today.
I got access to it. I
Maybe
just
they
had to
got it
wait a
fixed
while.
today, but it was driving me crazy because I was trying to pinpoint some things, and it's like on the marriage thing. In many cases, we couldn't find the marriage records in Travis County. We also use courthousedirect.com, which what they do is that they get from the state. You can do the same thing on the Texas Department of whatever it is. They have a vital statistics site where you can get indexes of marriages and divorces, but their site has all that stuff. You get a downloadable form file for each year, and if you don't know what year you're looking for, you're looking. It goes back to 1968, so you don't want to search each one of those files. But what courthousedirect.com does, if you go to their homepage and scroll down to the bottom, there's free divorce and marriage link. And then you hit that link and it pulls up a form, and you put in last name, first name. You can do it for the groom or you can do it for the bride. And then it'll search really quickly and tell you if they have a record of a marriage or a divorce. You have to search for the marriages and divorce individually, separately. And so I've used that a lot, but I know the woman that runs that site, and she told me they get them from Vital Statistics. So it's the same thing. All she does is she just pulls their data down and adds it to their database. And so they're free data check. And I found a lot, actually, because in the spreadsheet we're going to give you, it will show you not only that we have a column there that says wed, and yes, if we found a record of their marriage, and we've also checked divorces. We found a few of the people we had that had been married. We found a record of divorce in Travis County by going down to the district clerk's office and checking there. But the weddings, a lot of the weddings took place in another Texas county, and so we have a record. The Courthouse Direct gives us that information. So you do check the deed records. What about voter registration records? You ever use that?
In the past, we have, yes. Yes, we have used those. We'd go and see, especially on property owners where we'd have an owner that has 2 homes. So we try to pull the voter registration card to see which home are they actually registered to vote in.
That's another recent change at the tax assessor's office, which has the voter registrar under it. The voter registration verification, they call it voter verification. That voter verification site just changed, and you need a birth date or a voter identification number to get access to see if Joe Blow is a registered voter, and if so, what's his address. I had gotten a copy of the database that I bought from the voter registrar's office that is sort of hard to use, needs some sorting, but it tells you it has a separate address for last name, first name, middle name, but it has a consolidated property address field. And so if you search that database for the property address field and say search for wholesale, so if it says my 509 East 38th Street is my address, so if I put that in and search, and it'll find me in that file, and then you can go across and see who's actually registered to vote at that address. That's something that we've done for this project in order to identify people who live at an address, or they really, who's living there from the standpoint of voter registration. So that's another tool that's out there, but you're saying you do use it sometimes?
We do use it sometimes, yes.
Okay. The application form property tax form 50-114, application for residence homestead exemption, requires applicants to sign a statement that they do not claim another residence homestead exemption in Texas or outside of Texas. What steps does the Customer Service Department take to determine whether a homestead exemption applicant already has an exemption on a property in another Texas county?
Well, now we're actually using the LexisNexis, which is going to take us back to that, which is going to be a big tool that we're coming into. As far as that, I don't think we have any other way where we check to see if they have another exemption in another county.
I didn't think there was another way, and I didn't know y'all had LexisNexis, so that's a step forward if you used it. But you're not, with only 2 subscriptions or your 2 users authorized, you're probably not going to use it very often, are you?
I mean,
what would tell you to go and look for somebody that had property in another county? You may remember, I have actually a copy of a story. Dallas Morning News ran a story, I think it was Dallas Morning News, ran a story a few years ago that Governor Perry got nailed for having an exemption in College Station. And it turned out it was a house that his kids were living in, but they had no ownership interest, so he had to pay a small amount of money back taxes because somebody caught him with a property tax exemption in whatever county College Station is in, I don't even know.
Brazos.
Anyway, so that's the problem. Y'all, to my knowledge, there's really no easy way for y'all to do that.
It's not. It's really not.
And so that's unfortunate.
The goal, the hope is that at some point, if we can all appraisal districts get the driver's license information, that we might be able to share that with other appraisal districts, and we can each then start bumping it against. And I know the comptroller at one point investigated and saw if maybe there was a potential of doing a statewide database, and I don't know where that went, but that would be something that would be very helpful to appraisal districts if we had a statewide database of every person that is claiming exemption within the state, that we could bump our request then using that unique identifier of a driver's license number to determine if we have any matches outside of our county, because really, right now we're trusting that the owners are making a truthful claim when they claim it on their exemption. It's really hard to determine whether or not you need to research somewhere else, and where else you might need to research throughout the entire state. There's 25 million citizens in the state of Texas, and that's a lot to have to go through on an individual basis. I think it's beyond the scope of any resources any appraisal district has at this time. But I think that,
You mentioned something, and I would like you to go back and repeat it. about the comptroller exploring, I think you said, the idea of a statewide database?
I think at some point, and I don't know if the comptroller was exploring it or if maybe the appraisal districts went to her and said, you know, is there a possibility that you could help us with this? Could we get something that would be statewide? And I'm not sure where they went with that, but I do know that was a question that has been raised in the past to help us do that. So.
Well, I should tell you that I have interviewed or via email, because they wouldn't let me talk to whoever the expert is up there. I had to run my questions through public information or the press office, at the comptroller's office, and the answer that came back is that there is a statewide database. Y'all have, what the trouble is, from the usability standpoint, is that it's a snapshot. You have to send an annual report to them. They tell me that every appraisal district sends that certified base tax property rolls to the comptroller's office on an annual basis, and they do combine that into one database. The only problem with trying to use it on an ongoing basis is that it would be static. You know, it'd be a snapshot of what.
And I think the data submission that we do, that we give up to the comptroller, that they use, because they use that for property value reports that they do statewide in terms of property value, is it doesn't go that step further. We don't submit to them the driver's license number of the person claiming a homestead exemption. And I think that specific key identifier is what you really need to be able to, with any assurance, to identify and make sure that you're saying that I do have duplicates, because there could be a lot of people that are named Joe Smith throughout the state of Texas, but that unique identifier would make it usable for appraisal districts to say this driver's license number for Joe Smith appears in Travis and Harris and, you know, Nueces County.
That's a really good point. You need that unique identifier.
And the database that the state has at this time that they use for property value studies does not have that unique identifier. So just having a name, Joe Smith, there's a lot of them. You can't identify uniquely.
That's a terrific point. I'm glad you made that. Speaking of unique identifiers, your database does have a owner ID in it. Do you know out of all the properties that we checked, I only found a half a dozen that have property owners that had two properties with what we think are exemptions, one of which may be proper and one may be improper. I only found 6 properties on the whole database that had the same owner ID for both properties. How do you assign those owner IDs?
Those are assigned by our GIS department, actually. When they change the ownership, they actually establish those numbers.
And part of what happens when a new deed is filed, they look at it, they look and they have to determine, can I say with certainty that this Joe Smith at this new address is the same as Joe Smith at the other address. And it's really hard for them at that time that they're processing to be able to say that definitively, that those are the exact same person. And so typically what happens is they create another unique identifier for that owner. And then when we're able to, with certainty, say, I know Joe P. Smith at 123 Main Street, and he gets all his mail at 123 Main Street as the same individual, then they will combine those. But at the time that we're processing our deeds, it's very difficult to say with certainty that this person is the same as somebody else within the county.
I understand. And so therein lies the problem, that the owner ID really isn't very helpful for the purposes of weeding out. You can't have your customer service people say, well, you know, they assign this owner ID and go back and know, you know, they're not going to find anybody else with that owner ID.
Yeah, and sometimes the deeds come in styled differently. Sometimes it comes in as Joe Smith. Sometimes it's Joe P. Smith. They're the same individual, but we don't know that in reading the deed. It's very difficult.
I do understand. That's a good point. So if you can't check to see if someone has an existing exemption in Texas, you certainly can't check out of Texas, right? I mean, in the case of your DMA and direct mail address or different mailing address exercise, you did key in on out of state mailing addresses, but in terms of when you get a new application in, and you don't know if somebody already has an exemption in another state.
Unfortunately, we don't, no, sir.
I mean, even less probability of ever finding it, unless maybe Lexus, Texas. And some older versions of the Form 50-114 application for residence homestead exemption contained a line where a homeowner applying for a new homestead exemption could list an existing exemption and ask that that exemption be removed. On some of the old forms, it was in step 2 and some in step 3, but that line was removed around 2005 or so. So how, nowadays, how is the homeowner supposed to notify the appraisal district that they have an existing exemption which should be removed at the time that they're submitting a new exemption application?
That form actually, when that was written in on that form, a lot of appraisal districts, because that is one of the problems we were running into, is we would have a property owner that was actually moving from one location to the next. And for us to actually know, we started putting that onto our forms. But unfortunately, I think 2005 is about when we had to start becoming uniform with the comptroller's office.
We have to use the form as
We have to-
prescribed by the comptroller, and we cannot make any changes to that exemption form. We have to use the comptroller's prescribed form.
Well, actually, you have to be uniform or compliant with the comptroller's form, but as I read the tax code, you don't have to actually use their form. I think it's a good idea to do it.
We
but
cannot
I know
make
some-
any changes to the language, nor can we add any questions or steps. What we can do is, for formatting purposes, to pre-print it. We can print it and change, the pagination of the form, but in terms of the content of the form, it has to match exactly what the comptroller prescribes. We can't add questions, we can't change the language. It must be exactly as the comptroller prescribes. We may change the font a little bit to make it fit so that we can pre-print their name and address, those fields that must be filled out. Otherwise, we must use the comptroller's form.
That's a good point. I didn't realize that.
Mm-hmm.
So, since that line is no longer there, how does the
Makes it a little bit more
what does the homeowner, how do they know? What I liked about when I was reviewing all these different forms, I mean, there's been a gazillion different forms on those applications that you sent me on the open record stuff. There's a gazillion different kinds of forms, and even worse than some of the other counties that we're getting them from. And it's like, it was a good cue to the homeowner. When they submitted a new application, there's a line there that says, not only are you asking them, do they have an existing exemption, but there was a nice prompt there that said, do you have one that needs to be deleted?
Mm-hmm.
So that's not there anymore. What do you do? I mean, what's the homeowner to do? How do you prefer or get in actual practice, how do you get people to notify you that they have an existing exemption that should be removed?
A lot of taxpayers actually, because now if you look on the bottom of the application, with the brand new application, it's actually a little statement that they actually have to sign stating that this is their only homestead and that they're not claiming the exemption on any other property inside or outside of the state of Texas. But what a lot of property owners will do, we'll get phone calls from taxpayers saying, I'm trying to fill this out, but I do have another homestead. But we'll tell them on that application, you need to notify us and let us know that you do have another homestead and where that homestead is,
Right.
and that way we can take care of it when we get your application in.
Right.
But if that step was more clarified on the homestead application, then yes, that would be more simple.
And
Yeah.
I did outreach this year with the title companies and explained to them a lot of the issues we've got with processing homesteads, and that was one of the points that we brought up, is that they can only have one, and they need to notify us they can't claim two.
Right.
And so we're trying to go out and do education with the title companies as those properties are being sold and that new properties coming into
That's
play.
an interesting thing. I would have never thought of the title companies being involved in exemptions.
And you
Yeah.
should do it more too with neighborhood associations
Mhm.
to get the word out.
Yeah.
But most people that purchase property, they're going through a title company, and so they're a really good contact for us to try to disseminate information about homesteads and exemptions and what property owners need to do. And they need to know that information because the title companies are trying to calculate how they prorate taxes. And so it comes to play into the part of the work that they need to do.
Good point. Good point. I'm getting a real education here, which is what I came for. Step 7 on the current Form 50-114 requires an applicant for homestead exemption, just what you said a minute ago, to read, sign, and date the application. The applicant is warned, The applicant is warned that by making a false statement on the form, an applicant could be found guilty of a Class A misdemeanor or a state jail felony under Section 37-.10 of the Penal Code, which is tampering with a governmental record. Can y'all point me to any cases in which the homeowner has been charged with or convicted for filing a false statement on this form?
No, that's going to be up to the county attorney. I don't know, have we ever turned any over to the county attorney? I'd have to ask you that question.
I don't believe we have.
Let me check with my legal counsel on that to see
Well,
if
it's
they've
up to
had
the
any
county
that they've...
attorney, but y'all
We would have to
need
submit it.
would have to submit something to them.
Let me check
Do you
with
know
our...
of a case that's ever been,
To my knowledge, no, sir. Not to my knowledge.
okay. Well, did you want to check? You said
Yeah, let me
something
check
about
and see
checking?
if our legal counsel can recall of any cases where they have turned that over. Usually what we will do is we will go back and remove the exemption for that year and any prior years and remove it off the property. But I don't know that we've turned in anybody. I'll have to check with
Yeah,
legal
it's
counsel
a,
and see.
you know, it's, in a way, it's like boilerplate kind of statement, you
Mhm.
know, but on, the thing that I likened it to is you put a DVD in your, you know, to watch on your television, and oftentimes you get that FBI warning that says you can be fined $250,000 and in prison
Right.
for copying this video, you know, copyright protection. And you wonder if people really read that, you know, when you're signing that form 50-114. But at the same time, it's really important that they not bend the rules or break the rules by submitting an application when they already have one. That's why, going back to that line about deleting an exemption that's no longer on the form, that's why I like that there. It was redundant in the sense of, okay, yeah, you have to sign the statement down here that says I don't already have one. But when you have that line in there, it sort of makes you think a little bit harder about it than signing a statement down at the bottom that says I don't have another exemption.
And I agree with you. I love that line.
But it's not there.
But we
It's
gotta
not there
enforce it to
anymore,
make
but I
it-
have to enforce
So you're
it.
saying, going back to that form, that you can't do anything to that form, you
I
have
could
to
not.
use it,
I have to use the comptroller's, the exact
Okay.
language.
okay. Well, do y'all take any action to investigate when it appears that a property owner may have made a false statement on an application? I mean, you're investigating so you don't give them an exemption if they don't warrant one. But what if you find that they do have an existing exemption? What do you do?
What do we do? Normally what we'll do, to be honest with you, is we'll pick up the phone and call the property owner and let them know, first of all, because we have this homestead application and you're showing me, perfect example, somebody can have an exemption in another county. But if we just find out, you know, driver's license hasn't been changed, it has another county address, we go to the other county, realize that property owner still has an exemption, and we'll call them and tell them our records are showing, and I've checked with the other county, you still have an exemption there in that county. And in that instance, they may say, oh, I do. Yes, you do. So then, yes, if you want your homestead exemption here, we need notification from that other county that you've removed your homestead exemption there before we can process it. And the reason why we actually make that step is because of a property owner, whenever we remove an exemption, that property owner has an opportunity to protest the removal of the denial of the exemption. So a lot of times it's a lot quicker for us to contact that property owner and let them know, if we know that they have an exemption in another property, that they need to remove that exemption at that county before they can get the exemption here. It saves time, because in the other instance, the other effect would be we would deny the exemption, send that out, the property owner sends in the letter of protest. In the meantime, when they send in the letter of protest, they're going to contact that county and tell that county, well, that exemption needs to be removed because I want to claim it in Travis County, which they'll do, and then they'll bring us notification, and then we'll go ahead and add the exemption. So we try to clear it up a little bit ahead of time before.
Right.
Save some time.
And you're not taking any other action to say, you know, maybe you've submitted a false record, is that right?
No, we're not.
Do you suspect?
You have a lot of taxpayers, to be honest with you, who are really not aware of the system. Or you would be amazed how many of them think that because they filed the homestead application form here, it automatically removes an exemption in another county.
Okay. Alrighty. So you were going to check out, my next question was going to be, has y'all ever referred for investigation by the county attorney's office or any other law enforcement agencies a case in which an applicant for homestead exemption appears to have supplied false information?
I'll check with our legal counsel to see if they've got any history of that.
When the appraisal district has been notified by a homeowner that a homestead exemption on a property should be removed, when is the exemption deleted on a property in Travis County? Say somebody calls you up, or say they submit an application and they actually do submit some information and tell you that they have an existing exemption that should be removed. What's the process there? How long does that take?
It should not take long, to be honest with you. One of the first things I would look at is to see how long, well, first of all, you asked me to remove your exemption. I need to know what years are you trying to ask me to remove your exemption for.
Mhm.
Are you asking me to remove the current year? Are you looking for the future year if you're sending it in at the end of the year? Those are things I would actually have to ask the property owner to see what year you're trying to get the exemption removed for. Then if I call that property owner and they tell me, well, you know, I moved out of that house 8 years ago, then I'm sorry, I have to go back 5 years. So I need that information right up hand. I just can't make that assumption that you want me to remove that
And
exemption.
so you do that based on a verbal statement? On the
Well,
phone?
usually per phone call, yeah. Well, I have the original letter from the property owner telling me that to remove their exemption.
Right.
And then that's when we start going forward, looking and seeing, okay, yeah, this property owner wasn't living in that house at this time, and they.
Okay. So getting back to the question, once you've made the determination, you know, what years they want to remove or whatever,
Mhm.
so how long does it take you to get that in the system?
It should not take long to get it in the system. Once we actually know what years to remove, we should remove right then and there at that time. Our website would show, but the tax office may not get that information until the following month.
And it depends on our seasons, what season we're in. When we're in our protest season,
Mm-hmm.
we're very, very busy.
Right.
So we tend to get a backlog of work,
Right.
and then as soon as the protest season starts to wind down, we're able to start attacking that backlog of work. So sometimes it could take a couple months, depending upon when it comes into us, based on the workflow and the workload that we've got here in the office.
Okay. So if it's not in that peak period, when you take the action to remove the exemption, I'm trying to understand, you know, it's like you're looking at two different screens here. That you got the internal screen that the customer service representatives are working on,
Mhm.
and they're processing. Say they remove a request. Does that automatically, at that point,
We send them an email. A lot
Do it
of
by
times we'll
email.
send them an email, or they will even send us emails. If we know that someone's doing wrong, we try to communicate with each other and let them know that that owner has an exemption here, or.
do y'all get many notifications from other counties?
To be honest with you, we get phone calls all the time. We get phone calls all the time that tell us that this owner is applying for an exemption. The same as we'll check another county, they'll check other counties to check and see if that property owner has an exemption in another county to see what's going on. So we call and we also send emails.
So it's calls and email, okay? Does the appraisal district have written instructions that are to be followed by customer service representatives when processing applications for exemptions?
Yes.
Can I get a copy of that? Have you ever told a customer service representative that we are not the exemptions police?
No. We are not the exemptions police?
Mm-hmm.
No. We are not. Why would I say we are not the exemptions police?
So a source of mine said that you had made that statement, so I didn't want to say anything about it without having asked you. It may have had to do with, the allegation may have had to do with the fact that y'all have a lot of work to do,
Mm-hmm.
and y'all may not have time to chase every suspicious case that comes up. That was sort of the context that was given to me.
What records are they looking at? I don't remember saying that, but what records would they be looking at to say that we?
They were looking at exemption records and suspecting that there was a problem and that more research needed to be done, and that essentially the meaning that I got out of the statement was that they were saying that you were discouraging them from spending too much time on a particular application or researching a particular exemption to see if there was anything wrong with it.
No, I wouldn't do that.
Okay. That's the answer. Is a person who's buying a home, who's buying the home on a contract for deed, as opposed to going through a finance company, is that person entitled to a homestead exemption?
That's actually up to GIS if they determine that contract of deed for the ownership.
If we could determine that there's a change of ownership and that they have ownership interest in the property, I would think that they would be entitled to the exemption.
Well, that's the problem. The ownership, on a contract for deed, the ownership remains in the name of the person who's selling the property, and they don't change the deed until the person is finished paying it off. That's what.
So we send a letter out
To the
inquiring,
spouse.
is there a surviving spouse to this property that would be able to submit an application to continue it before we remove it?
So you get a list of vital statistics, just what, Travis County deaths?
Travis County list, yes.
It's my understanding that y'all only work that list for people who are over 65 or
No.
disabled.
That list is work for anyone.
It is for anyone. Well, I think it should be, but
Yeah.
I don't know how I got the idea, but I got someone told me that it was only being worked for seniors.
No,
No.
we work it for every,
We work
the
it for
majority
every-
of the people on the
are
list
seniors.
tend to be seniors, but
But
we
it's
work it
work
for
for
everybody.
Because the old people are dying more than the young people.
Yeah.
It's not fair, but that's the way
Yeah,
it
no,
works.
But no, it's work for the entire county,
Yeah.
homesteads or not.
Okay, you're working, okay, so you're working it for all ages. And can you give me any sense of the volume of that? I don't have any idea how many people die in Travis County.
There's 2,000 to 3,000 annually.
How many?
2,000 to 3,000 on an
Uh-huh.
annual basis.
Is that an annual list, or do they give it to you periodically?
We
or what?
request it
Annually.
annually.
So y'all ask for it?
We have to ask for
Okay.
it, yes.
Well, I've asked y'all a lot of questions regarding your operations. That's been very forthcoming. I appreciate that. What have I not asked you about this topic that I probably should know about, that you would like me to know about?
We appreciate any help from the public. So if the public is aware of anybody claiming an exemption that shouldn't be claiming an exemption, if they contact our office and let us know, we research those reports, we take those seriously, and we will research and investigate anything we
And
can.
who would they send those to?
To our tax info at traviscat.org.
Is that an email address?
It's an email
Yes.
address,
taxinfo@tcat.org?
Tax
Tax
underscore.
TravisCAD.org.
At traviscat.org.
At traviscat.org.
I know better than that.
And we appreciate your help, anything that you can do to help us.
Well,
We've got quite a
I've been
backlog
working on this
of.
project for too darn long. You know, I actually started this project in 2010.
Wow.
And
Wow.
I didn't get it finished that year.
Uh-huh.
And I've learned a lot since then. I tried
Mhm.
last year, and I had some volunteers helping, and they flaked on me.
Oh.
So this year I just decided I wanted to get this darn
it's-
thing done.
It's a lot of effort to
You
go
know,
through it,
I- My point and my interest in this project is, you know, it says in your mission on your website,
Mhm.
it says that you know, that you want to make sure that taxes are fair and that no one pays more than they should. But on the other side of that coin,
If
is that
somebody's claiming
everybody
something
should
that they're
pay-
not entitled
everybody
to,
should pay their fair
that
share.
burden gets
That's-
Yes.
that's the
shifted,
way I
and
look
yes,
at it.
absolutely.
And is there anything else that you'd like to add? I think it's a really good idea that we should put in there something about notifying y'all if they know of somebody that's getting exemptions that they shouldn't get.
Something that I tell when I go out and do my outreach, and it's real important, I stress it, if anybody has a family member that passes away and they inherit the property, that it's real important for them to notify us that they're no longer entitled to that exemption. Because sometimes people will pass away and they're not in Travis County when they pass away, so they're not in our vital statistics records. But the penalty, when we find out and we remove that exemption, those back taxes, particularly if they're over 65 and have had the benefit of that,
Yes.
it's a significant burden to the heirs of the property. So we try to get the word out to them that, you know, if you're inheriting property, notify us as soon as possible that you're no longer entitled to those exemptions, because otherwise that burden that you'll
Just
see,
keeps piling up.
plus penalty and interest, and it's significant.
Yeah. It really is. Ask Mr. Ornelas.
Yes.
So, going back